They called him Beanie, a nickname that stuck long before the NFL ever did. A compact, explosive cornerback who rose from smaller school underdog to Pittsburgh's training camp surprise. But today's story isn't about a highlight reel. It's about a roster phone call, the cold arithmetic of the NFL, and why Beanie Bishop, once a starter and a fan favorite, was suddenly ruled out of the Steelers' immediate plans. Let's start with the brief official fact. The Steelers released Beanie Bishop from their practice squad this week. It showed up on the transaction wire, short and simple, a name removed to make room on the roster. For most fans, that line reads like a technicality. For a player, it's a pivot point. But why? The surface answer is straightforward: roster management. Teams juggle positions constantly, adding veterans at one spot and trimming depth at another to meet immediate needs. In this case, the move coincided with the team creating space for an incoming wide receiver, a veteran addition to the offensive room, which meant a cornerback on the fringe had to be cut loose. That's the transactional reality of a 53-man roster plus practice squad constraints, numbers and needs in real time. Now let's unpack what led to that crunch. Bishop's story over the last 2 seasons is a mix of bright flashes and frustrating setbacks. He rose from undrafted free agent to starter in a season where he made plays that turned heads, interceptions, aggressive coverage, a fearless approach against bigger receivers. But the NFL is unforgiving to inconsistency and injury. In 2025, Bishop spent the year off the active roster and practicing with the squad. The coaching staff opted for experience and availability in the nickel and boundary spots. That combination, being on the practice squad while the team pursues veteran options, set the stage for his release. Injury history factors into the calculus more than fans often appreciate. Reports and analysis over the offseason and into this year flagged Bishop's nagging issues, hamstring and knee complications that limited his availability and interrupted continuity in his development. When a younger player looks dynamic but can't be counted on week to week, teams have to weigh potential against reliability. The reality in Pittsburgh's decision-making room was simple. If a player can't consistently practice or be activated at short notice, his margin for error shrinks. That medical uncertainty contributed to the choice to clear a roster spot elsewhere. Let me be clear, performance is not the whole story, and it never is. Football is roster arithmetic layered with projection. Coaches evaluate 4 things when deciding who stays and who goes: current play level, special teams value, health availability, and depth elsewhere on the roster. Bishop's tape shows a player who can cover, tackle, and make a turnover boxes 2 of those 4, but availability and special teams value are the other 2. If the staff judged that other corners or defensive backs offered equal or better special teams contributions and were healthier, the pragmatic choice becomes obvious. That's how the math favors the veteran signing over the young developmental piece. There's also an economic and timing element. Practice squad rules and game day elevations mean teams often keep players they can flip to the active list without using waiver wires or salary cap gymnastics. Bringing in a veteran receiver, someone who can plug immediately into offensive packages, often requires clearing space quickly. The practice squad is the most flexible short-term ledger teams use. When the offense requires a quick injection of experience, defensive backups are sometimes the easiest line items to remove. That's not an indictment of Bishop's ability, it's a description of roster mechanics. Now for the emotional context. Bishop was not just any name on the depth chart. He carried momentum from flashes he produced previously, plays that energized fans and gave a glimpse of a potential long-term starter. That makes the cut feel sharper. Coaches and evaluators are well aware of how young players' confidence can be affected by a release, and good organizations try to balance short-term needs with a player's development path. Sometimes that balance tips in favor of immediate roster flexibility, and sometimes players are re-signed or claimed quickly. The NFL churn is fast. In Bishop's case, releasing him opened a doorway. Other teams immediately had an opportunity to sign him, and rumors surfaced about potential interest around the league. That possibility is the silver lining most players hope for. Let's talk about the coach's perspective, the thinking in the staff room. Head coaches and coordinators have to project weeks in advance. They ask, who can be counted on to practice through a short week? Who can be rolled out on special teams and not cost us field position? Who fits the evolving schematic priorities, slot versus boundary, pressman versus zone? Beanie's skill set might have matched many of those schematic requirements, but if other players offered more versatility, or if the staff believed the incoming veteran receiver would help win the next game, the short-term decision tends to favor the immediate game plan. These are cold, sometimes impersonal calculations, but they also reflect the daily pressures NFL coaches face. From a performance standpoint, there's reason to be optimistic about Bishop's future. Tape from his best days shows instincts, ball skills, and a competitive edge. He's the kind of player who can catch on quickly in a new defense because his strengths are universal: quick hips, willingness to tackle, and an ability to anticipate routes. That makes him attractive to teams searching for depth after injuries or looking for a high-upside special teams piece. In the NFL, being cut is rarely an end, it's often a reset. Teams scout the waiver wire intensely. Players like Bishop rarely remain unsigned for long if they've demonstrated playmaking ability at the professional level. What about timing? The calendar matters. This cut came at a moment when teams are finalizing rosters around the trade deadline, preparing for short week matchups and trying to address glaring needs. That creates a spike in movement. Veterans become available, teams shuffle positions, and players on the margins become the currency used to close gaps. Bishop's release is best understood against that frenetic backdrop. A dynamic market, a club chasing immediate needs, and a player whose profile was useful but temporarily expendable. Now a frank assessment: could the Steelers have handled this differently? Perhaps. Teams sometimes try to place cut players on waivers with injury designations, attempt to stash them on injured reserve, or negotiate futures for the offseason. But those options carry roster and salary risks, and if the organization believed a veteran addition on offense would more directly influence upcoming games, the strategic choice was defensible. In short, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's not irrational. So what should fans expect? First, don't assume this is the end of Beanie Bishop's NFL story, far from it. Expect interest from other teams and a possible quick claim or re-signing. Expect Bishop to be working rehabbing, training, and preparing film packages for scouts. And expect the Steelers' secondary to be watched closely over the next few weeks as the staff evaluates whether the decision yields the desired roster stability. If injuries start to pile up, personnel moves move fast in the opposite direction. Players are reacquired in a heartbeat. Finally, a few closing thoughts for perspective. Roster decisions like this one are painful on a human level. Players uproot lives, agents work the phones, families endure uncertainty. But the competitive engine of the NFL runs on these fine margins. For a player like Beanie Bishop, talented, young, and raw, the path back is clear: health, special teams value, and consistent practice availability. If he can check those boxes, he'll find a new uniform sooner rather than later. That's the full picture: the transaction, the medical context, the schematic and special teams calculus, the timing with incoming offensive help, and the realistic routes forward. The name on the transaction sheet was small text. The story behind it is bigger, a reminder that pro football is a fast, unsentimental business, and that resilience often defines a player's future more than a single roster move.